All I'm asking is for us to trust the experts, the librarians and the teachers. I don't know if you guys know this. They don't make millions of dollars.
Exactly.
No, they do not. Can verify.
We got to address the suburban women problem because it's real.
Welcome to the Suburban Women Problem, a podcast from Red, Wine, and Blue.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Weinstein.
I'm Jasmine Clark.
I'm Rachel Vinman.
And this is the Suburban Women Problem. This week is National Banned Books Week. And unfortunately, book bans have not slowed down in the past 2 years that we've been talking about them. We often talk about the vocal minority when it comes to parents' rights. And the Washington Post recently found that just 11 people were responsible for 60% of all book bans in America last year. 11 people. It's not a large number. So today, Jasmine and I will get to share our interview with Pennsylvania State Senator Amanda Cappelletti. She's recently proposed legislation in her state to prevent book bans. And she's also the first senator in her state to give birth while in office. So we had a lot to talk about. But before we get to that, how are y'all doing? What have we been seeing in the news?
It's a lot going on. I feel like a lot happened in the last week, and a lot of it had to do with like the government shut down theater. And that's exactly what I'm going to call it, because that's really what it was,
100%.
Which is a bunch of theater. But I guess the positive, quote, conclusion, although it's a temporary conclusion, was that Congress did pass that 45-day funding bill that would, at least temporarily avert this government shutdown. But I'm just like, honestly, are we going to do this again in 45 days or are we going to actually get real and do the business of the people?
No.
Because it's just crazy. And I hate that the bill, the temporary bill at least, did not include any Ukraine funding, because I think it's just a nod to Putin. It's a nod to Russia. And it is not necessarily the direction that I think our country should go. But I think that overall, we went through all that stress. It's like we were, all that stress, all that posturing. And basically the end result was, oh, we're just not going to fund Ukraine. And I'm just like, come on, guys.
I think what frustrates me about this, and I said this in our group text, is there's a lot of people, probably not listeners to this podcast, but definitely friends and family of people who listen to this podcast who only see it as just purple dysfunction. It's not red, it's not blue, it's just the dysfunction in Washington, and it's not working for them. So in addition to having to, get people informed on the issues, we also have to cajole and convince people to take part in a process that they think is really broken and corrupt. And
this doesn't work. Yeah.
Their party is completely fractured, which just makes it think that everyone is fractured and broken because their party is so fractured and broken and so dysfunctional.
And they're the loudest.
And they're the loudest. But I also have to say on the Ukraine funding, which I've said many times, stingy pays twice, right? There is a reason why we put some investment in things so that we don't have to pay for it later. And I think there is still a worry that if we don't stop this, we might have to pay for it later, which is essentially what happened in World War II, where we waited so long to get involved and to do anything until we had no choice and had to get involved. And it just magnified the loss of life and what happened because we didn't step in earlier when we should have.
Well, I am not a national security expert or a Ukraine expert, but I know a guy. And he, I think he often describes it as the investment, the ROI, the return on our investment. We're spending pennies and getting back dollars for everything that we spend in Ukraine. So I know it's a lot of money, but we are dealing with a depraved madman who has no one around him. I'm talking about Vladimir Putin, no one around him. To be honest with him, even if they did, it wouldn't matter because he is trying to hold on to power. And we are seeing it in our country. We don't really understand it. Most Americans do not understand this mentality. So it's just very difficult, to convince people when they have no frame of reference. But this is, what a lot of people have talked about, of just, the lack of expertise or not everyone can do their own research. Everyone can just decide how they feel about something. And they've decided this is not a threat. But people who, study this space and understand this space, a lot of people don't want to listen to them because they just want to choose to believe something else. And this is like a weird phenomenon that we have seen, for the past, I don't know how many years.
And we can't have like an honest conversation about it. Instead, we get the loudest voices and the minority, and this becomes a political thing rather than actually weighing out the costs and benefits. What is that return on investment? And I think that's also what you get is when you have safe districts. So a lot of the loudest voices that are the most extreme, that are causing the most fracturing on the right, are in really, really safe districts. It's not great.
Redistricting matters.
Redistricting
It matters so much.
Absolutely. And we have, the Supreme Court rejected Alabama's gerrymandered maps again. And
I'm glad.
Gerrymandered maps are so not good for fair voting, but they're not good for election outcomes.
They're not good for our country, period. Like, as you said, what you get are extremists in office that feel very comfortable to be as extreme as they want to be. And there are no consequences to that extremism because they have no concern whatsoever about being voted out. And so gerrymandering does that. It also takes away the voices of people in communities to where they really do not have a level or fair playing field when it comes to being able to participate in democracy. So I'm glad that the Supreme Court rejected their maps. I'm still a little skeptical about why they continued to just kind of try to buck the system. And for some reason, out loud, basically said, oh no, Kavanaugh's going to flip and accept our gerrymandered illegal maps. And I'm almost like, Kavanaugh, what conversations were you having, dude? Why do these people think that you are going to be okay with their illegal maps? And I feel like anyone's actually asking that question, but I'm asking that question. Somewhere along the line, someone had to have spoken to him and felt very confident that he would flip and give them the map that they wanted, even though it had already been ruled unconstitutional, it had already been ruled illegal. And I'm very curious about that. But the trickle down effect of what's happening in Alabama is that even in Georgia, it's very likely that our maps are also going to be ruled unconstitutional, illegal, and we will actually have to go into a special session in order to redraw our own maps this year. So I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but it's probably going to be happening in the next couple of months. The writing is on the wall that that's likely what will be the outcome of our case, given what's happening in Alabama. And I think that's a win for the people in Georgia, but I also think it's a loss in that means that the maps that we voted with in 2022 were not legal maps. And the consequences of that are things like the shutdown theater that we just had to deal with. If they had just done it right the first time, drawn correct, legal, constitutional maps the first time, would we be dealing with some of the things that we're dealing with right now? I don't know, but I think the answer is probably no.
I love that you call it the shutdown political theater, because I think that's what a lot of politics sometimes boils down to. And this is why you get a lot of Americans who just get sick of it, because they know it's theater. They're not stupid. They know it's political theater. They know it's a bunch of grandstanding. And I think Americans generally get sick of it. And then I think this is why even talking points don't work, because the talking point itself becomes political grandstanding. And you hear things from the GOP like, we want to protect children. Yet they do nothing about the number one killer of children.
While doing the opposite.
I know, and doing the exact opposite. And then it also, what it does though, is I think it drowns out the people who are doing something. We don't hear as much about Biden and Harris announcing the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, doing something actually for children,
right?
What is actually affecting the lives of children. And we just hear less about it because we hear this political grandstanding.
A lot of what we have to blame for this situation, and there's a lot of blame to go around, but the way it is covered in the media, what the media chooses to talk about is generally not helpful. Here we are, you might have someone on a hit on, a segment on MSNBC or CNN for 2 or 4 or 6 minutes. That is not enough to do justice to these very complicated topics. And all of us have done those hits before on cable news. And it is difficult to say what you need to say, whether it's something you do all the time or it's just something you do occasionally. It really doesn't matter. You can only talk so fast. And they are also asking you questions. So you have to respond. And it's just really difficult. And so I'm sorry, not everything is bite-sized pieces. Some things are difficult and you have to get in there to understand it.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to that, to your point, Rachel, I think that the media had an opportunity to spend a lot more time talking about what the White House is doing when it comes to gun violence prevention. They had that opportunity, but to them, it wasn't sexy enough. They were like, what's going to get me more clicks? The dysfunction that's happening on Capitol Hill or the actual work that the White House is doing to actually protect children? And so in their mind, they're like, oh, disarray, confusion, chaos. That's what's going to get the clicks. And so they don't talk about it. They don't talk about how VP Harris has been basically traveling the country, going to HBCUs, engaging with these students, the voters of the future and the voters of now as well, because they are in college. But she's been doing this, but all you'll hear is VP Harris isn't doing anything. I'm like, no, she's doing things. You just no one's covering it. And
they don't cover the speeches. They're good speeches. Her speeches are amazing. I started listening to them and they're really good. I will say the president had a really great speech last week too. It was exactly what I wanted to hear from him. I encourage everyone to watch it and read it because I got different things from different versions, but Vice President Harris's speeches are fire. They are so good. You will listen to them and walk away just so encouraged. And
yes,
it is, there was a time when that's what they would do on news and cable news, and they would show those speeches. And it is just not something that's covered. And I can only assume it's because they have feedback that that's not what people want to see and hear. And they're a business.
I think they're just driving the narrative. I think they have decided that's not what people want to see and hear, because the truth is I could go the rest of my life never hearing Trump give another speech a day in my life. Yet, if that man farts loud, they are covering it. It's like, the people doing the work, that is just not what they want to hear. But let Donald Trump do anything. He's like the baby in the room. The baby took a step. And I'm like, come on, guys, come on. There's so many more important people doing more important work than whatever the heck Trump is doing or whatever the heck Trump is having for lunch that day. And so you bring up the good point, Rachel. They do cover speeches. They're just not covering the speeches of the people doing real work. And so then there are people out there that really truly believe that administration is doing nothing, because the only way they consume information about what the administration is doing, they're not talking about the administration. They're talking about literally everything else.
It reminds me a little bit, I will get there, I swear, of the Barbie movie, where for a long time, Hollywood told us that women don't go see movies. So we're not going to produce movies that women see. And then suddenly we get Barbie movie and we spend billions of dollars seeing it more than once. It's like, yeah, that's what we're trying to tell you. We actually do go see movies. You just aren't producing anything we'd want to see. And I think the same is true with the media and the news stories, where if you look at least in my feed, when you see those little viral videos that go of some doing something nice or some, right, that you see show up in your feed and everybody clicks on it. No, that stuff does go viral when you see this little nice thing that this one person did. Of I even saw one person, it showed up on my feed of puts out little drinks and snacks for the delivery people. That I was like, oh, that's so cute. And I looked and millions of people had clicked on that and seen it. I'm like, yeah, because that is interesting when someone comes up with a creative way to do something to brighten people's day. And I think it could be clicked on, but they aren't giving it to us. So we take what we have, and what we have is negative stories from the very vocal minority who don't represent most of us.
On that point, when we talk about what's interesting or, what the media gives us, and then it's they're feeding us whatever they think we want to eat, and they're not giving us the option to eat anything else. And so then they assume because we're eating what they're feeding us, that that's what we want to eat. They've never even given us the option. I bet if they would give us more, they would find out that
Mhm.
people are actually interested in what's going on.
Yes.
Even people who don't like them, they will probably click just to be negative and contrarian, but they're not even giving them the opportunity to do that. They're just like, yeah, we're not going to give y'all
Yeah.
anything. Like, I don't
good
want to
point.
be negative toward the media because I think that they do play an important role, but I would like to say that I would like to see them at least be a little better about giving us more. All right. Now we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have me and Amanda's interview with Senator Amanda Cappelletti.
As Amanda mentioned, this is National Banned Books Week, and Red, Wine, and Blue has been holding a ton of events. Tonight, Wednesday, October 4th, will be the first meeting of our Little Banned Book Club, where we read and discuss frequently banned children's books. We'll be reading And Tango Makes Three, a book about an adorable penguin couple named Roy and Silo. And if you want to bring powerful banned books to kids in your community, you can host your very own banned bookmobile. Each kit will contain 20 banned or challenged books, plus stickers, bookmarks, and a banned bookmobile sign. You can find links to order a kit and to RSVP for the Little Banned Book Club in the show notes. Now, let's hear from Pennsylvania State Senator Amanda Cappelletti about what she's been doing to stop book bans in her state.
This week, we are joined by Pennsylvania State Senator Amanda Cappelletti. We're so glad you could join us. Hello from another Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, Jasmine. Thank you so much for having me.
We are excited to have you on. So I want to start by asking you about your anti-book ban bill. So book bans are still on the rise, still a thing, and Pennsylvania has seen even more than most. I'd love to hear about your bill and why it's important.
I'll start with, it came to me through constituents. When Illinois passed their law, I have some great, very active constituents that I represent. They've reached out and they said, we need to do something like this in Pennsylvania. And I said, you got it. We did some research and we've kind of crafted it in the same vein as Illinois' law, where we're requiring libraries to adopt either the ALA, Bill of Rights, the American Library Association's Bill of Rights, that's indicating that they will not pare down their materials based on doctrinal or partisan or religious reasons. And if they don't do that, then they need to institute their own internal policy that they implement in order to continue to receive state funding. But the thing to know about the way the Pennsylvania library structure is set up is that they get most of their funding from local sources, so the municipalities and the counties that they actually reside in. So part of our bill then also prevents municipalities and counties from stripping funding from libraries who take this step. So that way we're ensuring that our libraries continue to be funded in a manner that keeps them going. And I think that is the reason we're doing that is because we are seeing legislation from representatives and senators who are saying, oh, this isn't a book ban, this isn't a book ban, but the practical implications of their bill or that policy is a book ban.
I think it's also crazy a little bit like how they're like, oh, we're not banning books. We're just saying like you can't read this book or access this book or have this book in your classroom or your library or your public library, but we're not banning it. Banning is such a strong word. And I'm like, yeah.
Or defunding all libraries, but somehow that's not. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And really what I want people to do is, because that is what you're doing. You're the way we're set up now. If you don't want your child to read that book, and here in Pennsylvania, as part of the classroom curriculum, if you don't want your child to read that book, you talk to your teacher, you can have them exempted from it. You can talk to your librarian and make sure that your child is accessing different books that interest them and keeping them away from books that you don't approve of. All I'm asking is for us to trust the experts, the librarians and the teachers. I don't know if you guys know this. They don't make millions of dollars.
Exactly.
They're not in this.
Can verify.
None of them are getting rich off of this.
No. nobody is in this for the paycheck. People, librarians, teachers, they're the experts in this area because they're passionate about literature. They're passionate about teaching and students and critical thinking and all of the things that go into that. So I'm going to go ahead and trust those people who have spent their life becoming that expert, and becoming that expert because they care, not because they're making millions of dollars.
I love that. And you're also trusting parents because you're saying you can exempt your own child, but you can't exempt someone else's child. They are the expert on their child.
Exactly. I don't want, you can say it's not okay for your child, but you can't tell me it's not okay for mine. My child should still be able to access these books. And to be frank, all of the books that are on these lists, I want my daughter to be able to access one day when she is reading on her own.
That's the interesting thing about word choice with them, because truly parents' rights would be, I as a parent have a right for my child to have access to this book, and you as a parent have a right for your child to not access the books you don't want them to access. That's true parental rights. And so when we hear all this stuff about parents' rights and this and parents' rights that, I think that Democrats and people like you, they have the right formula. The right formula is don't take away another parent's rights to have their child have access to the books that they want to have access to. It's just that simple. So they've co-opted the words, but the policy behind it is actually completely opposite to what they're actually saying. And so, we all know that these book bans are like super unpopular. Like no one likes them. Not even Republicans like them, honestly. But for some reason, despite all this polling and all these people that say they're not for book bans, the bans keep happening. And so I think, as you said earlier, while people are telling them, oh, it's not a ban, quote unquote ban, how can our listeners really talk to their friends and neighbors about what's going on with book bans and the things that they can do to kind of stop or slow this train that's been going on despite everyone saying we don't want this?
I think there are a couple of things that we can do, and it starts with the conversation and the way you're phrasing it. What you said is right, Jasmine. Like we need to phrase it in like, this is my right. My right to have my child access this book does not infringe on your right to have your child not access that book. Whereas the opposite is true in what's happening. You're stripping away my child's ability to access a book because you don't like it and you don't want your child to read it. So therefore, no child should read it. I think we really need to double down on that language and help people understand what's really happening. Because if it really were about the sex or the violence or anything like that, the Bible wouldn't be allowed in the library. And these are people who...
Or Romeo and Juliet, for that matter.
Yeah. But we know that those are books that aren't being banned. They're not being targeted, right? If you're talking to somebody that does understand or is empathetic to the idea that really these bans are targeting minority populations and trying to erase their existence out of our libraries, our literature, and really just trying to take us back to, I don't know, like the 1940s where it was like one point of view and that was it. And if you were different, well, too bad. It's still one point of view. Kind of a mentality. If you have people, help them understand that it is the LGBTQ community, it is women of color whose books are being stripped out of here that are talking about what it's like to be a person of color growing up in specific areas. Like so many good, rich books are being stripped out or attempted to be stripped out of our libraries and our curriculum. So there's that. And I think the other thing I want people to know is this is the vocal minority. That is the problem. These policies are pandering to the vocal minority, so let's be the vocal majority. Get out there. Tell your legislator you don't agree with this. Like wherever you are, tell them you're happy if they are protecting the right to read. Tell them you're not happy with them if they're trying to support book bans or really kind of any of these fringe ideas that are happening. That's the real problem in all of this is we're a little too apathetic. We're not necessarily digging in and getting involved and saying, like, these are the things we want to see, and these are the things that they don't want to see happening. And, we just hear this vocal minority, so it sounds like they're the ones that have the most support. even though we know that's not true.
They're very loud.
Yes.
Yes.
So loud.
They can be
They're
very
just
loud.
squeaky
and sometimes,
wheels. Yeah.
Yes, it's the squeaky wheel and the loud voice, not the majority. But I love that your anti-book ban bill came from people coming to you, real people, constituents, saying, this is something I want. I don't want book bans. We need an anti-book ban bill to protect our children and to protect my rights as a parent and what I want for my kid. I think it really says a lot that people are able to come to you and you're able to do something about it, and people can see some action coming out of what they wanted. And I know while you were doing this, you're the first Pennsylvania senator to give birth while in office. What was it like to juggle a newborn with budget season and all the fun of being a state senator?
So this is one of the few times I think I can really say with sincerity, my Republican colleagues were very gracious and supportive of me taking the time I needed to be with my daughter. And they were very excited when I did show up and they got to meet her.
Oh.
And we call her the bipartisan baby because of that.
Ooh.
It helped make connections. So I live in and represent a very progressive district. And I get to be that elected official that gets to rally on about the environment, about the book bans and stopping them. I get to talk about criminal justice reform in really progressive ways. And that's what my community is really passionate about, those things. That's who they are by and large. Abortion rights, all of those things. So when I first came in, I was kind of seen as like, from a lot of the Republicans, they didn't necessarily want to try and make those connections. I don't think
they didn't trust you. Like, who's that dim over there? We
yeah,
don't trust
exactly.
her.
Exactly. So when I became human to them by starting my process of trying to start a family, it started with, and not to get on a serious note, but I had 2 miscarriages leading up to the birth of my daughter. And I've been very open about that. And I speak about it every October because that's Pregnancy and Infancy Loss Awareness Month. I have legislation to help address paid time off when pregnancy loss happens. And I have bipartisan support because of that. So like I started to become human in that way. So as we got to budget season, I am grateful. I have the best staff in the world, if you ask me. They make me look good. They were out there. They kept me up to date in all the best ways. So I was able to participate through legislative leave, kept on top of it, but I didn't have to be in Harrisburg. I could be home with my daughter doing those things. So it was definitely hard, but I mean, you're not sleeping at that time anyway. So what else are you doing? Just catching up on the videos of the budget hearings and whatnot. Why not?
Oh man, that's so exciting. I love babies. And I love that like you found a way to kind of connect with the other side of the aisle. As someone who is also in the minority in my chamber, I always look for those ways. What do we have in common? What is something that we can talk about? Is it sports? Is it, our kids or, that something? And so it seems like you found a way, and the birth of your child, I think it humanizes you. But I also secretly, I think there are Republicans that believe Democrats don't have babies because they've been told that we quote, hate babies and we kill babies and all these things. And so when they see a Democrat that's pregnant, that it's like their brain is like, wait, does not compute. I don't understand. I thought you guys don't like having babies. And I'm like, no, giving people choices about their reproductive health care is not the equivalent of I don't like babies and I don't want to have one. And so I love that you kind of in your face was like, look, Democrats are not what you say we are. Even if that's not what you were meaning to do.
I love that you say that because even I believe it was said while I was pregnant, we were called baby killers on the floor of the Senate.
Oh my gosh.
That is the honest to God's truth. Now, granted, there was a point of order. Things happened behind the scenes, but one of my Republican colleagues saw fit as we were debating a constitutional amendment to ban abortion in Pennsylvania, whether I saw fit to call us baby killers for it.
I can't stand that. It's so hyperbolic and also so untrue. So many of my Democratic colleagues are parents. Some of them are young parents, all of these different things. I'm talking about parents of toddlers and stuff. So I'm glad you were able to kind of show them like in their face that that was wrong. But I think you also kind of give a great perspective on why it's so important to have young parents in elected office. Your perspective on book bans is probably very different than the 80-year-old guy who maybe has grandchildren that are in school, maybe, but they're not the ones sending their kid off to school at 7:00 in the morning. They don't know what's going on in the school library. They don't know what's going on in the classroom. They're just like arguing for things because someone told them they should and not because they actually have that perspective. So I think it's awesome. So why do you think it's important to have young parents in elected office?
Well, I think you're spot on with like, they're not actively involved. They're not actually actively involved in being kept up to date on the literature that's being read, right? A lot of these books, some of it's the classics, right? We know that's happening. Catcher in the Rye, like there are so many things, but there are a lot more new books that younger people are reading that are part of the curriculum that the older generation haven't read. They don't have an interest in reading them. And I have read them. Like one book that's on the list is Kite Runner. Right? Like I've read that book and it is so emotional and good. I loved it. So if that's on my child's reading list, like I know what that is versus the people who are trying to ban it might not have actually read it from end to end and maybe just an excerpt. So I think that that's such a great point, Jasmine. I think the other thing, and not even just being a young parent, but being so new in this, I'm taking my experiences, like I said, with the pregnancy loss. I had issues with lactation that like I'm looking into that, finding childcare, affording childcare. Like there's a whole new perspective that men aren't thinking about. And I think that was really obvious. Like I said, with my legislation for paid time off, the people across the aisle that signed on to it were actually men. And some of them were fit to share their own personal experience. And men had come up to me on the floor, sharing their own experience. They support me. And I think what you see from that is when you have people who've been through it, thinking about these things, like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. They're willing to support it, but that's not where their mind goes when those things are happening in their own families because of the impact on them. Still, huge impact on the non-carrying partner in a pregnancy when that happens. But like that's not inherently where their mind goes, is to like a policy change to be better supportive. Whereas that's where my mind went. Like I have the ability to be flexible with my schedule. Most people don't have the same flexibility. So how do we be better supportive?
I love that you use kind of being a mom as like, this is how it makes me a better state senator. This is how it makes me better represent the people I'm supposed to represent. Now, I know as a woman, you've probably gotten the question, right? But how do you balance it all? Which they never seem to ask the dads who are elected. So instead, what do you wish people would ask you about being a mom and a state senator?
Oh gosh, that's a good one. What do I wish people would ask about being a mom and a state senator? I think I'd want people to ask, like, what's your why? Like, why do you want to do this? Right?
That's a great question. Yes.
My why when I ran, there's still a lot of overlap. I'm still passionate about the same things I was when I ran. But now that I have a little girl, some of those things hit differently. And I will point out when it came to our gubernatorial election, we had an extremist on the right that's, basically like you're a murderer for abortion at the point of conception, like anything there, versus who we have now, our governor, Josh Shapiro. He's great, full access. That was all happening when I found out I was pregnant. And then I found out I was having a little girl. And like, there was a lot of anxiety there. So like my why now is like, not only am I passionate about these things, but I'm passionate about these things because I want my daughter to have a better life. I want it to look better and different for her than it did for me and than it does right now.
I love that because there's such a narrative of like, I don't know, like you have to stop being you when you're a mom. There's a little bit of that. I get it's like outdated, I think, but like you can be you and more.
Right.
And like you can be the same state senator with the same whys, but have even more whys from that.
Yeah.
That is such a great answer. All right. Amanda, it has been so great talking to you. But before we let you go, we always like to ask some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right. What's the best thing about Pennsylvania?
The diversity. We have some great cities, big cities. We have some smaller cities. We have gorgeous, gorgeous outdoors, mountains, lakes, and the cultural diversity that exists, not just like the urban to the rural, but we also have a lot of refugee communities and we have like the Amish as well. Like there's just so much here to offer that I love the idea of being a tourist in my own state because I feel like I'm never going to see it all.
I love that.
All right. We've officially entered pumpkin spice season. Are you a fan?
Oh my God, yes. I love a PSL. I'm a basic girl like that. But I love pumpkin everything. I love pumpkin everything. And it actually started when I was 18. I did a study abroad, lived in Italy. My host mother used to make me pumpkin risotto whenever I felt homesick.
Oh.
I don't know why, but now it is just like this nostalgic thing for me. So pumpkin everything all the time.
I don't like pumpkin spice, but I do think that pumpkin risotto sounds delicious. So
that's okay, Jasmine. We accept you for your non-pumpkin spice loving self. All right. If you could vote for any TV or movie character for president, who would it be?
Okay, I'm super bad with names. But have you guys seen The Diplomat on Netflix?
Yes, and I love it.
I want her to be president. It is the lead character. She is smart. She is she's just like that is the type of person I want to be president, who is that smart and engaging and it's such a good show.
I know. And she just really wants to do a good job. She doesn't care about the spotlight and the that was a good one. All right. Where can listeners go to find out more about you and your work?
So on social media, on the political side, it's Amanda4PA, FOR. You will find me everywhere. A website will come up with that. And on the official side, it's Sen, S-E-N, Cappelletti, my last name, all of the social media stuff. And I believe it's sencappelletti.com for a website too.
All right, Amanda, thank you for joining us today on the Suburban Women Problem.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we wrap up today's episode, we have to share our toast to joy where we celebrate a little something good about our week. Rachel, what's your toast to joy this week?
So, we record the pod a couple of days earlier than it goes live. So today I launched a Substack, which I've been working on really hard for 2 weeks. And it's been just basically all I've been doing. I know it sounds silly, but there's just a lot of different things you have to do. And I've had just the most amazing responses and already really kind stuff. And I'm really excited about this. But
yay, congrats. That's exciting.
Yeah. So it's very exciting. And I just am trying to process it all. It is my name on Substack. You can find it that way. It is called Keep Moving Forward. You can read the story about the background to that and why that's meaningful to me. But look, your life didn't have to be perfect. And I have a picture of my kitchen island, which is never perfect, and how dirty and messy and cluttered it is, no matter what I do. It's my Mount Everest. And I think we all have that. But you don't have to have everything in your life perfect in order to move forward and make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of the whole gist behind it. But it'll be a lot of things. And so that's my toast to joy. And Jasmine, what is yours?
Awesome. So first, I love that. I have a lot of Mount Everest in my house. So
I like piles.
We won't talk
piles
about
are
that. But my toast to joy is to community. I had the opportunity to celebrate the launch of one of my friend's coloring books. So she got a coloring book illustrated. The name of the coloring book is I Am Woman, Unleash Your Inner Warrior. And so in order to launch the book, we actually did a paint and sip where they basically gave us a canvas with one of the pages from the coloring book. And then we got to paint it the way that we would, have colored it, I guess. And it was just so much fun. It was so cool. And I think the best part of it was because if you've ever gone to a paint and sip, you have an instructor that stands in the front and they're like, all right, now we're going to take blue and we're going to put the blue right here. But this one, she was just like, tell me what colors you want and you can do whatever you want. And we were able to make our warrior the warrior that we wanted. And I loved mine at the end. I was just like, oh, I love my warrior so much. And everyone was so unique. Like one lady, clearly she's an artist because she was able to make hers with this beautiful headdress. And it was just an amazing, amazing painting. But I loved it because it basically let everyone show their inner warrior in their way. And so great times. Loved the opportunity. Look forward to the next coloring session. I did not realize how therapeutic coloring could be or painting could be until I did it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
100%. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Where can we get this book?
It's on Amazon, actually. It's called I Am Woman.
I'm totally ordering
Unleash Your
it.
Warrior. I am definitely giving every woman I know this for Christmas.
Spoiler alert.
Y'all already know what a Christmas present is. But yeah.
I saw your picture. I love seeing that they were all different, but they gave you something to start with. So if you aren't that artistic, you had a good base to start with and then make it your own, which looked really cool.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't consider myself artistic, but I just kind of leaned in. I was like, well, what are my favorite colors? And I just went from there. So that's how I went with it. And it was really fun. All right, Amanda, what is your toast to joy this week?
All right. So my toast to joy today is to the Michigan ladies who were successfully able to change the mind of a state representative who they really wanted
easy to do.
No, it is not. I would say not easy to do, but they did. So possible by texting and calling to make sure that he would support a domestic violence bill in Michigan. So my toast to joy is to all of the ladies who put in that hard work to change the mind of that politician to make sure that we got some legislation that really works for women in this country and women in Michigan. So my toast of joy is to you. Congrats, ladies. Nice work.
Cheers to you all for that. That's amazing.
Cheers. All right. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. Red, Wine, and Blue is holding a ton of events this week for Banned Book Week, including the inaugural meeting tonight of our Little Banned Book Club, where we focus on frequently banned children's books. You can sign up by clicking the link in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again next week on another episode of The Suburban Women Problem.
The Suburban Women Problem was created by Red, Wine, and Blue. Our producer and editor is Amy Thorstensen, our project manager is Lindsay Quist, and our editorial assistant is Abigail Martin. For more information about upcoming events and trainings, or to learn more about Red, Wine, and Blue, follow us on social media or at www.redwine.blue.